listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi Abebefe. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. Our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Michael, it feels like the first day of school. All the teams are now at training camp. We're seeing all the training camp footage, guys arriving, even teams now on the practice field. We're back. We're all the way back, man. We got blue chips, red chips, edge rushers later on in this podcast. This is a fun time of year here as hope springs eternal.
Yeah, where did the time go? I mean, I can remember being in the goddamn Rockland College out in, Rockland, California, up there up there, hot as hell. 49ers practice, there was a phone. This is how prehistoric this was, Femi. There was a phone in the baseball locker and baseball dugout that if someone called for John McVay for a trade or something, I had to answer that phone in the dugout and run out to the field and get them and have them come in. It was like, you think about all this stuff that we did back then. We had Randy Mueller on the show yesterday, and he and I were reminiscing about, being away at camp and, the bonding element. And, it was, to me, what a great, great time it was. It was unbelievable. I wish I could go back and start it all over again, man. It was fun.
Yeah, and our last podcast, we spoke with Chiefs general manager Brett Veach. They're away at St. Joe's. Like, some teams still do it. I know my team, they go out to Oxnard. They've arrived yesterday. I think Jerry Jones, Stephen Jones, Mike McCarthy are going to have their State of the Union press conference that they always have before training camp. I wonder what that conference will be about, all the contracts that are still up in the air down there in Dallas. But it's a good time of the year. Like, I think the teams that go away, I always think that, like, that's the way to do it, just because, like you mentioned, you can bond and you can do all of those things. But we know these facilities are now like billion-dollar facilities, and they're pretty good. And I guess teams are going to go ahead and use those as well.
Well, I mean, the hardest part is the technology. Is like we were at Napa Valley Marriott, and it was wonderful, and the weather was perfect. But you want to have access to your film catalog. You want to have access to the computer systems. You don't, and all that stuff matters. And it's hard to duplicate that at a small college. And then these guys are back in when I first started, nobody was talking about how much rest everybody was getting. Now, you want to make sure. What's that, Jimmy? And they said it in the Sopranos, we're going to go the mattresses, and and Jimmy Altieri says, I don't need to go the mattress. I got a nice Tempur-Pedic at my house. I mean, those beds in Rockland weren't very nice. I can tell you that. So. I think to me it just was interesting. So, but it's, you move on. The technology, I think, is what keeps teams from going away. I really do.
Yeah, the training camp beds of yesteryears don't really have your sleep number or any of that stuff with the technology to make sure you're getting the right amount of rest before the next day. But let's get into the topics of the day. And we wanted to start off with Jordan Love, Green Bay Packers quarterback, right now exercising what is now the new trend of the hold in. He's still attending meetings. He's still there, but he's not participating in training camp activities on the field. Now, a lot of reports are saying that a deal with Jordan Love is imminent, and this deal could be a massive deal, making him the highest paid quarterback in league history, although we've only seen one season of a sample size here. I guess, are they on the 1 yard line with this thing? The fact that we're getting these reports, how close is this to getting done? It could be done as soon as maybe even today.
Well, I think to me, one thing that's different, which I thought was going to be a little bit of an issue, I didn't expect the Packers have this sense of knowing, right? I think whenever you are in a contract negotiation, you really have to believe that what you're getting is what you're paying for. And I wasn't sure that the Packers had that knowledge in terms of the limited exposure. I mean, think about this. In 4 games last year, Love threw the ball 40 times or more, and they were 2-2 in those games. His completion percentage was only 56%, right? 7 of the 9 losses, they've scored 21 points or less. So I know he played well later in the year. I get all that. But you watch the Raider game, you watch some of the games, Matt LaFleur was protecting him. So I never got the sense, and of course I'm not around them every single day, that they had this confidence that, oh, yeah, I know this guy really well. He is going to be a top player in the league. I was completely wrong on that. They have that sense. And so because a team has that sense, they're going to do whatever it takes to get it done. And whether it's Saturday, whether it's Sunday, whether it's Monday, this guy's going to have a 10-year contract at astronomical numbers, and he's going to be the Packers. It's going to be the transition, Favre, Rodgers, Love.
Yeah, and I mean, if anything, like what we saw the second half of last year is an indication of what we might see going forward. What a three that would be with Favre, Rodgers, and Love there as being kind of the faces of the Green Bay Packers organization. And I think for Packers fans, you got to be excited based on what you saw at the second half of a season. I mean, 32 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, over 4,000 passing yards. Like, these are really, really good numbers, despite the fact that he started slow. I mean, I remember the Denver game against the Broncos. I was like, what is this Packers offense doing? Like, it didn't make any sense. And then slowly but surely they kind of found things. And yeah, they stumbled a little bit. The Bucks game, they lost that one, but that might have been more on the defense. Of course, we think back to the Giants game on Monday Night Football where they lose to Tommy Cutlets in that game. Like, there was a couple games where they stumbled in the second half, but once they really hit their stride, and especially what they did down in Dallas in the wild card game, it was really eye-opening, and there's probably a version of that game against San Francisco where they should have won and maybe been the team that actually played Detroit in the NFC title game.
Could have. I mean, look, I think there's a lot of strengths about this Packer team that you got to like, right? They can pass protect really well. Third best team in the National Football League in sack percentage last year. Only Buffalo and Kansas City were better. And obviously we know with Mahomes' movement and Allen's movement that helps. They were seventh, and I think this is a really important statistic that we don't talk enough about. Seventh in punts per play. How many punts do you get a game, you know? And they were the third best red zone team in all of football last season. And what really hurt them really was the fact that they couldn't make enough kicks. They were 23rd in field goals made per game, which is a killer. And so they have room for improvement. Now, I think the question you have here is, does Aaron Jones not being there, how much does that affect him? Is Josh Jacobs going to be able to be the player he once was because he wasn't the same guy for the Raiders that he was 2 years ago? But there's a lot to like about this Packer team. They're going to put Jordan Morgan, the kid they drafted in the first round, they're going to put him at right guard, and they can pass protect. And this kid's going to have protection, and he's got great young, skilled players around him. So, look, they see more of him than we have. For me, I would be nervous about doing this deal because I haven't seen enough. I'm a little bit, okay, some good, a lot good, some I'm not sure of, but they know, and so they move forward with it. But then they're going to this then changes the market, Femi.
I was going to say, yeah.
Because if you're Tua and you're sitting out there, and if you're Dak Prescott and you're sitting out there and you're saying, hold on, time out here. Wait a minute. The Packers just paid this guy all this money on a 10-year deal. I blow him away statistically, and you won't give me what I want? Something's up. This is going to make it harder for Tua. It's going to make it harder for Dak.
Oh, 100%. And Tua has had back-to-back seasons where he's put up the passing numbers. 2 years ago, he had 3,500 passing yards and 13 starts. Last year, a career-high 4,600 passing yards. He led the league in passing yards at least, 29 touchdowns, although 14 interceptions for Tua. But yeah, if you're Tua, who right now is also kind of exercising, not an official hold-in, kind of like a semi-hold-in. He's doing the 7-on-7 stuff. It sounds like he's doing individual, but he's not doing the 11-on-11, even though the quarterback, you don't really get touched on 11-on-11.
Going to touch him. It's the most like I don't even understand it. Like, what are we, soft or what? Like, I mean, why would I let the guy hold in? I think Jerry must have told CeeDee Lamb, I'm going to find your ass. So CeeDee Lamb said, I'm not coming. I respect that. I don't respect the hold in. Look, like, okay, Trent Williams is holding in San Francisco. Okay, I get that.
Did Trent Williams show up? I think he might be a holdout, isn't he?
No, I think he showed up. I think he's holding in. Ayuk's holding in. Like, to me, I would have told Ayuk, no, don't even bother coming. If you you got a contract. Either you practice or don't come. You've made so much goddamn noise all off season about your contract. Like, at some point, we don't need any more. Because I think what happens is the distractions become every day. The writers ask, what about, how's it going with this guy? When's he going to start practicing? Like, either you're in or you're out. It can't just be, okay, everything's fine. Like, to me, you create more problems for yourself. I don't get the collective bargaining agreement. And people are going to say you're the old angry guy on the lawn. No, bullshit. The collective bargaining agreement was put in place so we don't have hold-ins. And now teams are just bending over, spreading so they can get, so guys can hold in. Like, you have leverage.
Yeah.
You have leverage. Why wouldn't you? It's a business. Why wouldn't you use it?
I mean, but if you're the agent on the flip side, aren't you telling your guy to hold in to avoid the fines? Because that was our thing about Ayuk was, hey, like he missed mandatory minicamp where it's like, dude, you're just giving away $160,000 for no reason. Just show up and like just run around a little bit and then just keep your money. Versus now he avoids the $40,000 fine per year that CeeDee Lamb is now accruing.
Yeah, I don't want to see Ayuk's moopy face. Oh, I'm unhappy about my I'm unhappy. I don't want to see his fucking moopy face. I would be like, get him out of here. Like, just stay out there. When you get your contract done, you're happy. Come on in. Yeah. But I don't need you to be unhappy around everybody.
It's the Jonathan Taylor of last year.
Yeah, like you see, looking at him, then all of a sudden you get it done. Like, I think it disrupts your team. I think it causes conflict within your team. Look, Trent Williams, he doesn't have to say it. Trent Williams is going to have days off. Like, I would have told Trent Williams, come to camp. Look, you're not going to do much. We'll work this thing out. You got to pay Trent Williams. You got it. I mean, he's the best left tackle in football. You're going to pay him. I mean, Darrisaw just got a huge deal, so you know you're going to get something. And so, like, that's not hard. Like, we're going to take care of you anyway. I mean, they're already on the McCaffrey's on the rest program, too. I mean, the 49ers – they need to get healthy. So, like, but we don't need a grumpy guy. Now, maybe Ayuk isn't. Yesterday I saw they called him off the field. He went into Lynch's office. Maybe they're going to get something done. I don't know. But to me, again, they're not going to trade his ass. But at some point, you got to play. Football players play.
Yeah. I mean, you're looking at it as like the hold in, like I don't want to see you just kind of moping around here begging for a contract. But maybe the hold in is sort of like extending the olive branch of, hey, I've showed up. I don't want to risk injury, but I've showed up. Can we work something out? I'm not going to hold out and be like this holdout guy and not come to camp. Maybe that's extending the olive branch. But every contract
is based on a deadline, though, Femi. You need a deadline in every contract. It's the old saying is, I don't need more time. I need a deadline.
Yep. Deadlines
like
make
you need
deals.
a deadline. I mean, you go to Japan, they don't start negotiating with you until 3 hours before you have to go to the airport. They want a deadline. You want a deadline. Look, either we get this shit done or we don't. Let me just keep thinking about it. Let me take it around. Let me start, I mean, look, we can get the Joe Shane. Well, you can't. This sounds like Joe Shane's leadership manual. You can't wait for that to come out. When's his book coming out on leadership? I can't wait for that goddamn thing.
Let's go ahead and take an informal poll of the family and see who we should draft. Should we trade up, perhaps? We'll talk about that a little bit later on. Want to get more to CeeDee Lamb as well as Matthew Stafford restructuring his contract with the Rams. We're just getting started. It's the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
This feels like 20 years ago, Michael, where training camp time is contract time. Holdouts, hold-ins, like here we go. This is the National Football League. We thought the new CBA would erase all of this stuff, but now we've kind of found ways to circumvent the rules in place here to maybe do the hold-ins to avoid the fines. One guy who is not avoiding the fines, though, is Dallas Cowboys All-Pro wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. He is officially a holdout. He did not report with the team to Oxnard, California, where their training camp is taking place. So CeeDee Lamb will be accruing $40,000 fines for each missed day. However, the caveat is because he's on the rookie contract, the team could waive the fines if they were to come to some sort of agreement on a contract. Do you expect that to happen? And also, this holdout, how does this affect the Dallas Cowboys as they're heading into a really important training camp of what is kind of like a make it or break it sort of season for them in 2024?
Well, don't you think Lamb thinks he's going to get his fines are going to get washed away, or else why wouldn't he be a sit-in? Or unless Jerry told him don't come in here. See, I would rather say, stay out of here, work until we get a deal. We'll figure out the fine thing when you come in. You're going to pay something. Maybe you're not paying 50, but you're going to pay something. We'll give you a chance to get it back, like they did with Chris Jones. But to me, it makes no sense. I mean, what's the integrity of having fines if we're not going to do it? See, I think we're going down a slippery slope here on this wall. Guys are just going to keep walking in. If somebody doesn't have to pay a price for holding out, they're going to just keep holding out, right? I mean, it's just not going to work. I mean, there has to be deadlines in all negotiations. It's hard to get stuff done. I mean, look at the Packers. They're trying to give away money. I mean, I was on Pat McAfee yesterday. Danny I would love him to be a general manager, that guy. I mean, that son of a bitch wants to give money away to everybody. Oh, they got to pay Tua. They got to pay this guy. I mean, they got to pay that guy. I mean, it's like playing Monopoly with Dominic. He just wants to give away all the money. There's no money in the board. It's like unbelievable. Just give all the money away. Okay, sure. And I think on CeeDee Lamb, I think the hard part on CeeDee Lamb is this. I think CeeDee Lamb's deal should be easy to do. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of it is what I've been saying from the beginning. Is it 35 with new money or is it 32 with old? See, there's the conflict. There's the conflict. There's the rub. Does he want more than 35 in new money because he wants to beat Jefferson, or does he want 32? I think that's the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, if you're CeeDee Lamb's agent, you're saying, hey, my client just had an all-pro season, 135 receptions, 1,700 yards, 12 touchdowns. He's probably, outside of Dak Prescott, your most important offensive player. Can you take care of him? If you're Dallas, is there any apprehensiveness from taking care of him? Or is it just, like you mentioned, the 35 versus the 32? Like, because are we really doing this over the $3 million? Does it mean that much to the salary cap based on where Dallas is at financially?
Well, that's a great question. And I think the way to answer that question is one of the problems I have with Hard Knocks is you have to run models, right? You have to run models. That's what your cap person and the general manager, they sit in a room with the board. Okay, if we sign Daniel Jones at this number and we franchise Barkley at this number, okay, what do we look like in 24? What do we look like in 25 financially? Okay, put in what the cap's going to go up. What does our team look like? As a cap guy and as the general manager of the team, you can't just on line item go over the team. It has to, what does it look like in the model? See, it's one of the things that I think college football needs to understand. College football, people are asking me, do you have anybody who can manage the cap for us in college? No, the head coach has to manage the cap in college football. He's got to make a decision about what's a replaceable player and what's a non-replaceable player. And then you only have X amount of dollars in NIL money. Where does it go and how is it allocated by position? So if you're Joe Schoen and you're sitting in the room and you just did Daniel Jones's deal, you're going to franchise Barkley, so now you look at your model and you say, okay, what does our team look like in 24? What do we add to it? We have these players on the contract, this guy, and then you reevaluate their contracts if they're worthy of the deal. So in any model, if you were a true GM, you would have modeled that Barkley, you franchise Barkley, you've got Daniel Jones. Where are we? Okay, where are we? Now the cap's gone way up. Where are we now? What can we sign? What can't we do? Who could we redo? How much cash do the Giants want to spend? So if you're Dallas, you're modeling that. You're modeling that. What Steven and Jerry are probably doing is they're saying, okay, if we sign Dak to this next year, we sign Lamb at his cap number, we sign Parsons at this number, okay, what does our team look like? Because, look, let's face it. I mean, everybody, I saw this, people were talking about Lawrence being a great player for them and being all this. I mean, I was going through their team, and you watch the tape. I mean, there just is no, they've got three great players, but when you watch them, I don't think it's pretty clear that Lawrence was the same player he was 2 years ago. Let me give you his numbers, okay? Mm-hmm. Lawrence had 4.5 sacks and only 10 quarterbacks hit last year. Does that sound like a player that should be on that level of scouts? No, of course not. So you're constantly managing the model, but you're modeling the team out, so you know what you're looking for. Okay, look. Here's where we got a real problem. I think Detroit's modeled their team, okay? Detroit said, all right, Jackson's going to be a free agent next year. We're not going to sign him. Plug in a player at $4.5 million at right guard. You don't know the name of the guy. You don't know the name of the player, but we'll put $5 million into the right guard position since we're not, or the left guard. We're not going to sign Jackson. You follow me?
Yep.
Put in X amount for this position. We're not signing that guy. Now what's our team look like? You follow me? Mm-hmm. That's called general managing. You're building your team. But when you're running to the coaches saying, would you like to have Brian Burns on our team? Would you like to have, if you sign Burns, we don't have any more money. Like, what the fuck are we doing? We look like we're amateur hour at Dixie. Like, that's not how you run. For the fans, and I know they're all going to say, well, you just hate the Giants, yeah. Lombardi. That's bullshit. I don't. That's not how you run an NFL team. You run an NFL team by modeling the team out. You say, okay, all right, I got this player. If we draft this guy at the first round, boom. You're doing all this stuff. You don't have 87 people in the room talking to you about it. They can't understand that shit. They don't know it. Scouts don't have any idea about team building. I mean, it's proven. They just want to add players. Your job is to build the team, and your job is to manage the cap. Okay, if we don't do this, we're doing that.
Yeah.
So that's where I think Jerry is with Lamb. I think that's where Jerry is with Lamb. If I pay Lamb X, what do I have left for Parsons? What do I have left for Dak? And what does my team look like? Because when you model it, you say, okay, well, we got to get rid of Zach Martin. We're done with that guy. What's that look like when we cut Zach Martin? Like, you can't live in the present as the general manager. You have to live in the future. You have to see where your team, that's you're in charge with the franchise moving forward. You protect the franchise moving forward. And I think what the Lions have done is exactly that. Okay, we don't want this player, we're going to sign this guy. We're bringing this player in for that. I got it. We're going to bring DJ Reader in. Even though he's hurt, we're going to replace him, put him in here. I'm sure they sat down and they modeled that out. They said, okay, we got money for we got money for a defensive tackle. We've got money for this. Meanwhile, the Giants are saying, well, do we want Wilkins or do we want Burns? No, it should be modeled out. We have money for a defense. This is what we need, a defensive tackle. I'm not asking some position coach what he thinks we need. I mean, all of a sudden you got fucking 28 general managers on the team. Al Davis would have gone berserk.
Yeah, no, I think that's a masterclass in how to be general manager versus just acquiring talent, which we've had that conversation before. Like, scouts just see, hey, I see what the player does in a vacuum, but you have to look at it from more than just a vacuum. You got to look at the entire picture because that's ultimately how you protect the franchise. For fans, though, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, you always say that you can't overpay for great. Would you put CeeDee Lamb in that category to where, hey, we would be comfortable paying him that $35 million in new money? Is he a great player? Production aside, but just when you look at the film, is he one of those kind of guys?
I think that's a great question, and I think the only way you can answer that question is modeling the team, because if you don't model and you don't, because I'm signing Parsons before I'm signing Lamb, and I need a quarterback. I'm signing, if I think that Lance is better or could be a good player, then I have the ability to then sign, Lamb. But if I don't, and I'm definitely signing Prescott, which I think they have to do, and I'm going to sign Parsons, I don't have that kind of equity to sign and still build a team. This is why you can't answer that question the way you asked it to me without a model. What does my team look like if I give them the money?
Yeah.
You see, what does my team look like if I give them X? What do I have left? What don't I have left? Where am I going to be depleted? How many draft picks do I have moving forward to fill in? Could I find a player not as good as Lamb? He's a great player. I'm not saying he's not. But could I find a player $8 million less?
I mean,
I don't know the answer, but that's why you model. That's why you have to model.
Yeah. Or it's like what would be required to replace that kind of production there for CeeDee Lamb? It's an interesting gymnastics.
I'm sure the Eagles sat there in the offseason and they said, look, the Eagles were smart. They sat there and said, okay, look, I'll give you a stat for the Eagles. The Eagles ranked in last year. They were in 22. They were first in the league with 11.05 sack percentage. Remarkable. Last year, they went down to 24th with a 6.39. So they sat there and said, okay, we're going to put money in our defensive front. We're going to sign player Y. We got X amount for player Y. That was Huff. We're going to get rid of Riddick. We'll trade Riddick. We're going to get his money. If Sweat doesn't take a redo deal, we're going to redo that. We're not going to put any money at linebacker, and we're going to use the draft to spend money on the corners. We're going to re-sign X. It was all modeled out. Now, if they didn't get Huff, they probably had another name. Maybe they would have gone to Greenard. But it was modeled out, and they know what their team is for next year. But if you don't do that, you just let's take that guy. Well, what's my team look like if I take Lamb? If I sign Lamb to $35 a year, what's my team look like in 26? Does anybody want to answer that question, or does just Danny O want to give them all the money?
Got to pay Lamb, got to pay Parsons, got to pay Dak, and then all of a sudden,
got to pay them all. Pay everybody. Get Dominic's Monopoly game. Just take out all his money. He'll pay everybody. Dominic wants to build hotels on every street.
Well, I'm going to Dallas Cowboys training camp next weekend, Michael. I'm making the trek over there to Oxnard. I'll give you the Trey Lance report to see if we can go down that path. I'll give you that one. We'll spend a couple days. We'll see what it looks like at Dallas Cowboys training camp. Maybe CeeDee Lamb will be there by now. I don't know. If he needs a ride, just fly to Vegas. I'll give you a ride over there to Oxnard, and we'll discuss that. All right, we got to get to some other stuff as well. Matthew Stafford on the other side. That restructure, we don't know the details of that yet, but what does that mean for the Rams moving forward? This is the GM Shuffle.
You're listening to the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. Here is Femi Abebefe.
Rolling along here on the GM Shuffle, talking all these contracts, holdouts, hold-ins, restructures is the case in Los Angeles. As Matthew Stafford is there for training camp after he was restructured a contract. He was due $31 million this season on his 4-year, $160 million extension that he signed after they won the Super Bowl a couple years back. Well, Stafford has 3 years remaining on a $40 million per year contract extension he signed in 2022, and he only had $15 million guaranteed after this season. That is, of course, from Adam Schefter at ESPN. So we don't know the details on what this is, but I'm assuming, Michael, this means that they guaranteed some years for him this year and maybe even beyond.
I think that was the big contention, and we said they had to get to it, and the Rams obviously did, and they needed to, right? I think, to me, the Stafford thing is, and I don't envy the position the Rams are in, I really don't, because it's that you're in that fine line. You know the end is near, you can see it, you can't feel it, you don't have a replacement. You're only a good team when he's there. You can't really make up for it. You don't have a candidate. You've brought some guys in to try to see if you could, but that's not going to help you right now. It wasn't Carson Wentz. It's not going to be Jimmy Garoppolo. It's not going to be Stetson Bennett. So you got to get to your next guy, but it's hard to get to your next guy. It's a little bit like New Orleans. They know who Derek Carr is. Mm-hmm. And they're not sure they love that, but they went ahead and guaranteed a salary for this year so they could function as a football team, and now they're stuck with them for more years. You're kind of damned if you do. And meanwhile, let's take the Raiders. The Raiders were like everybody going back to when Gruden was there. We got to get rid of Carr. We got to get rid of Carr from the top on down. And then once you get rid of Carr, you realize, oh, shit, we're in trouble. And now, you're better off managing what you have than you are starting over, because when you start over, you're never around once the start over begins. No owner's going to let you stay around. You're not going to be able to do what Presti did in Oklahoma City. So I think the Rams had to do something, and they got to pray he stays healthy, that elbow's good. I mean, he's trending. All his numbers are trending in a direction that concerns you, right? They're trending in a direction, but he's still a really good player. He's 9-6 last year. He went from a 52.6 success rate to a 47.5. His average per attempt went from 8-1 the Super Bowl year down to 7-6. And so he needs to get, that's hard to do to get it back. But at least he stayed healthy, which I'm not sure the Rams thought he was going to be able to do, and why they were thinking about trading him.
Well, isn't that why they sort of built their team to kind of be now a power running team? Because they go out and make some of those free agent additions there to bolster up the interior of the offensive line. This was an O-line a couple years ago where they were like, hey, there's a lot of question marks. Can they keep Stafford upright? Now that O-line is probably the strength of this team, and they can lean on Kyren Williams in that run game.
Right. Let me ask you a question about the Rams. How many games last year do you think they scored 21 points or less in?
Ooh, I would say they won 9 games a season ago, I believe. I would say 5 or 6 of them.
Good call. There's 7. They're 2-5 in those games.
Wow.
7 games they scored 21 or less. That's a lot for a great offensive head coach, right? Yeah. And in those games, and I think the only game that they did run that they didn't win that they ran for more than 100 yards was the Steeler game. So they need balance in their run attack. One of the things I think hurt them in Detroit was they only ran for 68 yards in that game. They need balance, and I think that's what they addressed, right? So one of the preseason questions you have when you're watching the Rams are they going to run the football more effectively? And I think that's going to be the case, I think they have a better chance at doing that. The other thing they have to do for the Rams, if they're going to be successful this year, is their field goal attempts are just, they were They led the NFL in field goal attempts last year. The problem was they were 9 for 15 outside of 40 and 5 for 10 outside of 50. They gave away points in the kicking game.
Yeah, I believe it was the Seattle game that came down to the kick at the end of the game. Like there was games there for the Rams where had they been better in the kicking game, they could have maybe had a better record. And they made the playoffs, but maybe they don't have to go to Detroit in that wild card round. Do you think that the Rams, because we talked about it a little bit in the lead up to the draft, but once we actually got to the week of the draft, everyone was talking about, hey, they wanted to trade up for Brock Bowers. They wanted one of those weapon guys. Do you think they ever contemplated, hey, should we trade up for a Michael Penix or a Bo Nix to maybe start that kind of succession plan now of saying, hey, if we only have 1 year of Stafford left or maybe 2 years max, we at least have a guy that we're confident in moving forward?
Yeah, I think they, again, these are all discussions that you model out. That's why, when Shane's on the phone saying what it's going to take to get 3 to get the pick from you, he should have, that needs to be modeled out. If we trade up to get Drake May, this is what it's going to cost us, right? Mm-hmm. This is what it's going to cost us, and this is what we'll look like moving forward. Like, that's all modeled out. Again, it's just he's sitting on the phone. It's line item. It's all just line item. Okay, we want to trade for that. If you trade for May, what does your team look like, right? Mm-hmm. So I think I'm sure the Rams are saying, if we trade up and we're able to get J.J. McCarthy, or we're able to get Michael Penix, what's our team look like? What's our cap look like? We give away these picks. What do we do? Like, I don't know how. That's called second order thinking. I don't know how you do any of these ideas. See, you and I talk about these ideas because we're not in the profession.
Yeah,
we're playing Madden, yep. Right? But when you're in the profession, and every decision you and I make affects 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other decisions. If you don't look at what it affects on those, how are you truly general managing? How are you truly general managing? You're not. You're just adding players. And then we'll see where we are next year. Like, to me, if I were at the Giants, we would have gone in and it would have been, okay, here's what we're going to do. They talked about we got to add the offensive lineman. They added 2 offensive linemen. Illuminor now, he's back at right tackle already, which is where he belongs because he's better than Evan Neal. So at least they could have a starting right tackle. Neal's hurt, but then he got hurt. They didn't even draft one. Drake May was, that was the conversation, but they told us after the draft they wanted Alt. We haven't heard Alt's name mentioned other than when they were at the workout. I mean, it's like Frank Pantangeli says, it's lies, 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 but there's no model. This is what drives me crazy. Nothing is about, everything can't be asked on a singular basis. It has to be, that's why you're a professional. It has to be, what are we doing moving forward? What does this do for our team? And whether you're a head basketball coach in college hoops or whether you're a head football coach in college, every decision you make impacts another decision. And so Stafford, if they moved up, what would they look like? What would they do?
Yeah. I mean, this is like economics right here. I mean, because we all talk about supply and demand for economics, but opportunity cost is the big thing. And when your team building, say, if we go ahead and draft this player, what does that mean for this player? We're no longer able to get this, or we're no longer able to do this. If we go out and sign this guy, like, that's opportunity cost. You have to weigh the opportunity cost of making a decision and say, is this what we want to do going downward? Because like you mentioned, there's the domino effect of all of these decisions that you make. They never happen in a vacuum. I did, though, chuckle watching the Hard Knocks when they had like, hey, these are the 6 guys. We're picking 6. If we're there sitting we're going to get one of these guys. And Joe Alt was not on that list. I did find that to be rather interesting.
I mean, it's Frank Pantangeli. Lies.
Like,
well, of course,
where did that report come from?
How about when he's asking the assistant coaches what their needs are? Like, that's your job. You tell them what they need. You think they're coming in telling you what? Of course, that's what you get paid for. That's why you're making $5 million a year. You have to make that decision. You have to understand it. It's like, it's like, I look, I love when John Mara talked about the history of the game. And John Mara, when he was talking about Accorsi's conviction to move up,
yep.
I mean, that's what, Accorsi was a lead. He was leading it. This is what we have to do. We have to get a quarterback. We'll pay any price. We'll figure everything out. But he wouldn't give away Omenora because he knew he needed a rusher. So he understood that. This is like, if we sign Brian Burns, we won't have any money left. You would know that before you were talking on the field. Because what's the alternative? If we don't sign Burns, what would it cost us to get Grenard? What would that cost? Okay,
or Danielle Hunter or something like that. Yeah.
Or Danielle. All right, so we put Danielle Hunter in at $20 million. Okay, this takes now. The other thing you have to understand, we'll put Hunter in it, and this is how much cash it's going to cost us, because that's an important part of this conversation too. How much cash? So okay, if we then we lose all this cash. All right, what do we have left over for this? What do we have left over for that? What do we need for this? What must we get from the draft? Okay, now what is the draft strong in? Well, the draft's really strong at receivers. Okay, so then let's not pay for a middle-of-the-road receiver. Let's put that as a slot and put that at $800,000. We'll pay for that. This is what you do. You combine the draft with it. Do you really think this whole conversation that Super Bowl winning general manager Terry Fontenot had this? Do you think he modeled this out? Oh, I'm going to sign $100 million for fucking Kirk Cousins, and then I'm going to go draft Michael Penix. That's the model. I mean, AI would have spit at him.
NFL GPT says, "Get the hell out of here with this model." That's
NFL GPT says, "Give your Super Bowl winning GM Terry, give your all your trophy. You're so brilliant. You broke the model." It's like when Big Blue played, like when they were playing Big Blue in chess. If the chessboard didn't recognize the move, it kind of just screwed the game up. That's what would have happened. It would have been like Deep Blue. Yeah. Unbelievable. We got to get the blue chips or red chips. Yeah, before I got to get off this soapbox.
Yeah, I did want to ask you about the Hassan Reddick thing. Officially a holdout. The Jets placed him on the reserve/did not report list. I mean, this is I don't know how Joe Douglas traded for him and didn't realize that this was going to happen. Well, but hey, here we go.
People are saying that they thought they had a deal with Reddick when they made the trade. You never think you have a deal unless you have it on a piece of paper.
Yeah, you either have it or you don't.
Like, people are making excuses for the Jets. There's no excuse. Yeah. You think Joe Douglas models anything out? Like, if he did, he would have put in goddamn. Now he could have had Bryce Huff for the franchise number.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wouldn't you rather have Bryce Huff for the franchise number than have to redo Riddick's deal at age what he is? Where he was in decline, where Philadelphia is telling you, okay, Philly, we were at the highest sack percentage of any team in the league in 22. Then we dropped down to 22nd in the league with Riddick on our team. They're telling you they need a rusher. Meanwhile, you're taking their guy and giving them your guy. It's unbelievable.
And it's something that you've said that, like, nobody really wants to be paying for other people's problems and trading for other people's problems. Well, the Jets said, we'll go ahead and do that stuff. We'll trade for your problems. But Bryce Huff, that leads us to blue chips and red chips, which we're doing the edge rushers. I think this is like my favorite one that we do every year because these are the guys that impact the game. These are the closers of the National Football League. We'll start with your red chips. These are the guys who are really good, but not quite in the elite tier. Joshua Hines-Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars, Bryce Huff, who you mentioned, now with the Philadelphia Eagles, used to be with the New York Jets. Khalil Mack with the Chargers. Danielle Hunter now in Houston after being in Minnesota. And then Aiden Hutchinson for the Detroit Lions. We'll see if he can take another step forward in year 3. What is it about these guys that you really like?
Well, I mean, look, I think Hutchinson almost made him a blue chip player. He had 33 quarterback pressures last year. I think he's right there on the fence post. I think Hines-Allen, Joshua Hines-Allen now, was another guy at 33 quarterback hits. I mean, those are important numbers to look at. The number one guy in the league in terms of quarterback hits was T.J. Watt with 36. Hines-Allen had 33 of them. That's pretty damn good. It means the ball's coming out early. That's what you want. That creates the pressure. That creates the turnovers. That does the kind of thing. So, I think ultimately, when you look at Khalil Mack, he had 17 sacks last year. How many did he get against the Raiders, right? In the Aiden O'Connell game. Do you remember? I think he had 6 in that game or something.
I made the Pro Bowl off that game.
Yeah, I mean, I made him a red. I couldn't keep him off the list, but I thought he was really good. You know what's interesting when I was going through this? Christian Wilkins had 9 quarterback sacks last year, 23 quarterback hits. And, and if you would have put him next to Lawrence, I think it could have been just deadly, right? I mean, it could have been just deadly. But, I would have rather had the tackle than the end. I would have rather paid Burns. I'm trying to think where Burns isn't in the blue or the reds.
Yeah.
But he had 8.5 sacks last year. Mm-hmm. He had 8.5 sacks last year, right? He had Where is he here? Hold on,
the
Brian. He had 8 sacks. He had
the contract suggests he should
he had 8 sacks. He had 18 quarterback hits. Wilkins had him beat in both categories, and Wilkins was free. Yeah. Wilkins was free. What did you model that? Did you model that? Did you put? It's like when Uncle Junior says to one of my favorite lines of all time when Tony comes over and he says, "Did you offer my nephew a sandwich?" And she says, "Well, I'm not a maid. I'm a nurse." She said, "Well, did you offer him an aspirin?" You know, and of course, did you offer Wilkins a deal? I would love to know that.
Yeah, I mean,
anyway, we're back on these.
Yeah, maybe the no state income tax was what did it for Christian Wilkins hanging out here in Nevada. But
like Huff. Maybe that might have been the case too. I'm not, but I think Huff is going to be dynamic. You know, Huff had 10 sacks, 21 quarterback hits. They paid him. You know, now Riddick had 11 sacks and 23 quarterback hits. So you're getting an older player with the same number, but I think there's more juice in Huff than there is in that. You know, the guy's going to be interesting is Leonard Floyd. Now, he's not in blue or red chip, but does he add a dimension to the 49ers that they need because Chase Young didn't give them that?
No, Chase Young now in New Orleans with the New Orleans Saints there. But yeah, the 49ers, they've been looking to get that guy to pair with Nick Bosa, who finds himself on the blue chip list, former Defensive Player of the Year, as well as Max Crosby with the Raiders, Micah Parsons with the Cowboys, TJ Watt with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and then the reigning Defensive Player of the Year, Myles Garrett. And there's a good chance that your Defensive Player of the Year in 2024 is likely to come from this list.
Yeah, I don't think anybody can argue about it. I think Crosby's the best guy on the list, frankly, because he plays the hardest. 31 quarterback hits. You know, he's 14 and a half sacks. I mean, he never takes a play off. The guy never is relentless. You know, I think to me, with him and Wilkins on the same side, it's hard to double that. That's going to be a problem for people. You know, and if the kid from Virginia, kid from Texas Tech comes along, they've got a chance to really, with Kuntz, the way Kuntz played down the stretch, they do. It'll be interesting to see where one of the things that makes Parsons so unbelievable is the fact that, you know, he didn't get much help. The rookie, OC, I can't say his last name, you do it. Yeah. He was more productive than anybody else.
Yeah. The Cowboys need some guys to step up there.
The other thing that's worth visiting, they took Trayvon Walker, who had 10 sacks last year, 19 quarterback hits, over
Hutchinson.
Hutchinson. And Hutchinson, to me, is, 11 and a half sacks, the 33 quarterback hits. Now, he's playing from in front more. That's the other thing about this. TJ Watt getting 19 sacks and 6 quarterback hits. They're rarely playing in front. Rarely.
Mm-hmm. I mean, TJ Watt's an animal. Like he's going to get his sacks regardless whether they're behind or if they're ahead. And when he gets his sacks, he's ripping the football out. He's he's scoring defensive touchdowns. The guy is ridiculous. But Trayvon Walker, it is interesting because Hutchinson's on this list, and maybe we see Hutchinson on the blue chip list when we do this exercise next year. But I'm still holding on to Trayvon Walker stock. Like I think a lot of people look at Walker like, oh, the Jaguars, they picked a bust. They should have taken.
I don't think he's instinctive enough.
You don't think so?
I don't think he's instinctive
you sold your
enough.
stock?
No, I think he's a good athlete. I think he's going to come up with numbers. I just don't think he's got. See, I think part of pass rushing is instinctive. It's a feel. It's one of the reasons why. What's his face? Suggs from Baltimore.
Yep.
He ran that 4.9, and everybody said he wasn't good enough. But I learned this back with Tim Harris. Walsh made me go to Memphis State like 3 times to time Tim Harris, the outside linebacker, played at the Packers probably before you were born. I went to Memphis 3 times. 3 frickin' times, I go time that guy.
Walking in Memphis.
And we could never get him, huh?
You're walking in
He
Memphis.
was in Memphis State. I was walking. I was on Beale Street, Peabody Hotel, and so I literally had to go there. And so, but he could never run better than 4.9, but he had great instincts. He was long. He was athletic. He had really good instincts. And we were just worried he wasn't going to have enough speed around the edge. But I think to me, there's partly like Suggs. Suggs didn't run good at Arizona State, but Suggs had great instincts, and Suggs had power, and that makes up for that burst around the corner. That's something that I don't think gets enough in the conversation. Like Hutchinson's got instincts, right? Yep. He's got a feel for it. He knows when to turn it into power, go from speed to power. You can feel it, right? Some of these guys, they just are more robotic, and I think Walker's a little robotic. I think that's why he's not going to be a blown pick, but I think Hutchinson was the better pick. There's no question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Hutchinson's definitely the better player. I just think that like with Walker, with his length, the strength, what he does in the run game, if he can also give you double-digit sacks, like that's a really good player as well. It's just like
They did last year for him.
Exactly.
They did last year. I mean, they got think about this. They got 27.5 sacks from both players, and they got and I mean what they get 33. They got 33 pressures and 19 pressures. So they got 52 pressures from those two players, which is good.
100%, yeah.
And you can get tackles for losses out of it. See, that's where Crosby's good too. I think Crosby led the league in tackle for losses. He had 23 of them. Him and Danielle Hunter led the league in tackle because they can penetrate and get behind the line. That's what Khalil Mack does a good job of too.
Yeah, and Crosby, even those plays where they're trying to run away from him, he'll run that down. The guy just plays with his hair on fire. He's one of the most fun players to watch in the National Football League. Maybe if the Raiders can win enough games, maybe he finds himself winning a Defensive Player of the Year. That's been what's held him back from winning that award, is that they don't win enough games. Maybe sometime in the future.
They ain't going to win enough games this year. It's going to be hard for them. With no quarterbacking.
O'Connell and Minshew.
Yeah. And then they can't run they're going to be able to run the football. I mean, I think that's the question. Where their offensive line?
Maybe the Raiders will sign Dak Prescott next March. Maybe that's what happens. That does it for this edition of the GM Shuffle. The Edge Rushers episode, always fun there because we could talk about this for hours, but we got deadlines and we got to go ahead and get this done. Like we mentioned, we start off with deadlines. You give us a deadline, you can't give us more time. Thank you to our producer, Elliot Bowman, with us on the ones and twos. Subscribe, rate, and review as always. Also on the YouTube channel, make sure you're commenting, liking these posts on the YouTube page as well. We see you guys. We know that you guys love to engage with it on the video format as well. So, Michael, I'll talk to you on Monday. Training camp is here. A week from now, we'll get the Hall of Fame game between the Bears and the Texans. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Femi.